Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast about your Kindle, books, and all things Amazon. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is April 12th, 2019. Greetings to you from downtown Denver. I have an unusual opportunity for you in today's episode. It's a first look at an ambitious new project designed to help any of us become more fit for the future. The creator of this initiative is a frequent guest on the show, James McQuivey of Forrester Research in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
These 25 years of research that I've done have shown me that there are some people who see technology as a means to a valuable end that they are in charge of.
In news, I want to talk about the all-new Kindle, which began shipping this week, and I received a review copy a few days earlier in the week, so I've had some time to use it and to think about it in terms of the overall Kindle lineup, which now begins with the basic Kindle, $90, the Paperwhite, $130, and the Oasis, $250. Those are the prices with Wi-Fi only. And I have to say I'm very impressed with this new basic Kindle. I haven't used one of these. In the previous iteration of it, it was $80. It had no front light, and that really did make it less usable than the other Kindles in the line, and I understand why Amazon would have redesigned the basic Kindle so that it did have a front light. In the process, they raised the price from $80 to $90. But having tried this, I think it was a good trade-off to have the price go up slightly, but to have this be essentially a very similar reading experience to the other two Kindles. Now they all have the front light, and then there are various differences which justify the difference in price. What I like most about the all-new basic Kindle is just the way it feels. This is not something you can evaluate from specifications and reading a press release, but when I've had a chance to actually read on this review copy, it's noticeably lighter than the Paperwhite. It weighs 6.1 ounces compared with 6.8 ounces, and then the Oasis is 6.9 ounces. So when you have these three in your hand, the new basic Kindle is the lightest. It's a little bit heavier than the previous basic Kindle, but not noticeably so. And it's also slightly smaller in its dimensions than the Paperwhite. It's on the kind of the tallness of it from top to bottom. The new basic Kindle is 6.3 inches tall, and the Paperwhite is 6.6. The Oasis is also 6.3 inches tall. There's a real smoothness to the corners of the basic Kindle, and it doesn't. When I look at it, the Paperwhite looks like it's also got rounded corners as well. If I'm just reading my hands as opposed to thinking about dimensions and everything, I prefer the feel of the new basic Kindle to the Paperwhite. Now, the things which start justifying a higher price, depending on your preference and your use, are the fact that the Paperwhite has a flat screen so that there's no bezel that drops the screen down below the case. And I think that does give a smoother action. If you're advancing the pages on the Paperwhite, you're just touching the same surface, whether it's the screen or the case, whereas on the basic Kindle you're sort of dropping down into this well to touch it. Also, the basic Kindle is not waterproof, whereas the Paperwhite and the Oasis are both waterproof. The pixels per inch, which is a measure of resolution and kind of how the screen looks, the basic Kindle is 167 ppi and the other two are 300. So that spec makes you think that, well, I would think that the other two would look a lot better. If I look really hard at the Paperwhite screen versus the basic Kindle screen, I can see a kind of a finer look to the fonts and the reading. But if I'm just looking at the basic Kindle itself, I don't have any sense that, well, it's too blurry or it's this or that. I wish it was sharper. You can only detect the difference when you compare it with the ones which have the higher PPI ratings. The other differences among the models include storage. On the basic Kindle, it comes with only one configuration. That's 4 gigabytes of storage. If you're reading Audible books, that might limit the number of Audible books you could have on it and the number of books, but 4 gigabytes is going to put a lot of material on that basic Kindle. The Paperwhite comes with 8 gigabytes, and you can also get a 32 gigabyte model, same with the Oasis. There is a difference in the number of LED lights on these devices, and I can't tell the difference in looking at the Paperwhite versus the basic Kindle, but the basic Kindle has 4 lights that kind of bathe the screen with light so that you can read in the dark, and it'll just adjust to a nice readable level because of those 4 lights. There are 5 lights along the Paperwhite, so presumably a better display of light, although it's pretty hard to detect that with the naked eye in my experience. And then the Oasis has 12, and I think you really can see that it's a smoother amount of light that's going across that screen on the Oasis. It also has auto-adjusting light, and I've never really been able to figure out what advantage that is. The other big difference on the Oasis is physical turn buttons, and I like those. It goes with the larger size, the 7-inch screen on the Oasis, and so by the time you're paying $250 for the Oasis with Wi-Fi and special offers, you're getting a 7-inch diagonal screen, which I really like, and you're getting this kind of one-sided, one width of it is wider than the other, so it's kind of a one-handed feel, and it'll just flip over if you go on the other side to your other hand. And you've got nice action next and previous page buttons. And then the Kindle and the Paperwhite, you tap the screen to advance. The basic Kindle does not come with a 3G option, so you have to use it with Wi-Fi. And I kind of splurged on the Paperwhite that I bought. I got the 3G because when I'm in an airport, sometimes it's just a pain in the neck to try to get on the airport's Wi-Fi and download a book. And so if there's 3G, that's quite an advantage. When I thought about kind of this lineup, and I'm going to try to put out a video tonight that sort of shows now we have 3 choices in Kindles and which one might be best for you. The case for the basic Kindle largely is price. It's $40 cheaper than the next one up. It's noticeably lighter. It's smaller. It's almost as crisp to read as the Paperwhite. And really, if you're worried about dropping into the bathtub or in the ocean, that would be something which might worry you. But in terms of a basic reading experience, it has this kind of minimalist feel. It's the cheapest, and it's a really good read. The case of the Paperwhite would be slightly crisper reading experience because of the higher DPI. That feel of the flat screen. I think that another advantage of that flat screen is it's easy to just wipe it and it's all the same level, so the dust can't get kind of in the cracks or the corners of the basic Kindle, which has that recessed screen. So that's an advantage. You can get a 3G option, and you can get 32 gigabytes with the Paperwhite. And the case of the Paperwhite compared with the Oasis is it's $120 cheaper than the Oasis. The case for the Oasis, it's kind of the, if you're a real book lover and you're reading way more than 6 books a year, which only 20% of Americans read 6 books a year, but if you're someone like me who, reading is a big deal, a big part of my life. And so to spend $250 or more if you get 3G and the other options, it doesn't, may not seem ridiculous. And if you can afford it and you really want kind of the best reading experience on this e-ink screen, the Oasis gives you a larger screen. It works out to be 30% more text on a page. You get the page buttons, and you get the off-center feel, and you get the brighter lights. I'm not sure how this is all going to translate into my own reading arsenal, because I prefer the feel of the new basic Kindle to the Paperwhite, mainly because of the weight. But if I am going to replace the Paperwhite with the Kindle for when we go on trips and I'm going through an airport, going to spend a day traveling from here to Boston or whatever, I really would like to have that 3G so that I can just pop down a book from the cloud if I need it and not have to mess with the Wi-Fi. I don't really know how that's going to work out. I'm going to have to return this review copy to Amazon, and I will have to decide whether I'm going to buy my my own basic Kindle and maybe find a home for this Paperwhite so that I would have the Oasis and then I would have the new minimalist Kindle as my other Kindle. One thing, the one that they sent me has got a white case on the basic Kindle. My Paperwhite's got the black case, and I think the white case looks a lot better. So that may be part of why I'm drawn to it. I still do a lot of reading on the Kindle Fire HD8 during the day. I kind of like seeing color on a page, and it's more distractible. And sometimes I like to sit somewhere where I can check Twitter or the news while I'm reading a book. And in more the active part of the day, that Fire HD8, which costs $110, is good for reading. I use the Fire HD10 for the script for the show, and the other tablet device is not made by Amazon that I really am getting quite fond of is the Remarkable tablet that I bought for $499. It's really for thinking and planning, and when I'm sketching out an episode and I use the stylus, I'm just really enjoying it. It seems way too expensive for just that single purpose. But if I've got a tool that helps me think things out, and not just on the podcast, but other projects, I think I did the same thing when I was trying to conceptualize what I had to do on my taxes this year. I was just kind of making this fun writing on the tablet, and then it popped up on my computer screen with a nice synchronizing process, and that was pretty good. It kind of makes me wonder if there might be a Kindle out there sometime in the future. You could call it the K-tablet or K-tab or something, an e-ink device that would enable you to write the way I can write on this Remarkable tablet, which uses e-ink, and I could read books on. Maybe that would be mixing up too many things. You wouldn't have that purpose-built feeling. You'd say, well, am I going to be drawing on this or am I going to be reading the Kindle? But the other use case that I've enjoyed is that with the Remarkable tablet, I can drop a PDF on it, and then I can underline the PDF, which I did with Jeff Bezos' letter to shareholders, which I'll have a link to in the show notes. Nice new addition to the lineup. If you've got one of these basic Kindles and you've got some thoughts, please send them along to me at podchronicles@gmail.com. At the end of my conversation with James McQuivey in November of last year, he mentioned that he was pondering whether or not we have the personality traits that will enable us to participate in the future. I could tell from the passion in his voice that this was a topic he is deeply engaged in, so I made a note on my calendar to circle back this spring to see if he would be ready to talk about this further. The timing turned out to be just right, enabling us to take a deep dive into the Forrester Future Fit project. I spoke with James by Skype between here in Denver and his home west of Boston on Tuesday, April 9th. Before we talked, I had done some reading about the project, and I took the diagnostic survey that tells you whether you have high future fitness, medium, or low. It was a fun test or survey to take, and it left me with quite an appetite for how this project is going to be filled in so that it's more precise measures of 9 different characteristics that he's found really do project how someone is going to be able to handle and be effective in the future. So I began by asking him how he got into this in the first place.
I've spent my whole career, really 25 years between Forrester and being an academic, trying to figure out what makes someone likely to adopt new technology. And that's really what I started doing this work in. And what's happened is over the years, I've come to realize there's the question of adopting a new technology, but then there's also how will someone choose to use the technology once they have adopted it. And what are the characteristics of someone who sees that technology as a way to step forward in their lives as opposed to maybe just a new trend that they're interested in or something that everyone else is doing, so they're going to try. Not that any of those is better than the other, but these 25 years of research that I've done have shown me that there are some people who see technology as a means to a valuable end that they are in charge of. And so when we do our research here at Forrester, we many years ago identified a characteristic that we call consumer empowerment, and we use this as a way to talk about, companies, you need to serve these empowered customers because they are more aware of their options. They can choose to stay with you as a brand or not, those kinds of things. And so that's an imperative for the company to understand. But at the same time, from my perspective, getting at the core motivation of the human behind the decision, I was really interested in what is empowerment? How does it affect the way people approach, the way they eat, the exercise that they're willing to do or not, the attitudes that they have towards changes in politics, society, and so on. And as I conducted this research over now many years and went back to some of our older research to re-examine it in this light, I came up with this idea that I could create a single tool that would measure the basket of attributes that seem to co-occur in those people. So just to be clear, to distinguish it from what I would have told you 20 years ago when I first was at Forrester writing about something we call technology optimism. Back then we were just measuring whether you were likely to try the new thing or not. Now I'm measuring your attitude towards the use of that new thing. I'm going to get value out of this. I'm going to be able to use it to change my life. I'm going to be able to have a better outcome. And then there's some really interesting background to that knowledge that if we had more time, I'd explain. Like, for example, without going into detail, when we first started measuring the Latino and Hispanic audience in the United States now 15 years ago, where we do dedicated surveys just of Latinos, and so we'd have to measure them second generation, first generation, documented versus undocumented. You get into a lot of different groups, and people's attitude towards technology adoption in these groups was incredibly high. And there was actually at the time an attitude towards, well, these are immigrants, they're not going to have a lot of money, so they're not going to be interested in new technology, they're just scraping by. Was an attitude that a lot of our major clients or partners had. And when we did the research and we applied our understanding of how we measure people's interest and use of technology, they were off the charts. We didn't even know how to compare them because we'd been measuring it in multiple countries by this time, and some countries were slightly better and slightly lower, and that's fine. But the immigrant population was the highest we'd ever measured. And that's when we started to realize it's because they're not just seeing technology as, I want to have that phone that everyone has, although back then we didn't even have smartphones, so that's a bad example. It was iPods at the time, I guess. But it was that they were recognizing that there was a tool available that could improve their lives, and they wanted that tool. And if you think about that, that's exactly someone who's going to immigrate to the United States from, say, Central America, which is where a lot of our subject population came from. That was who was coming here, was people who were saying, what's the tool that I need next in my life? Oh, it's the United States. And so they would immigrate here. And the same attitude applied. Why is everyone carrying around that gadget? Oh, it's because it can improve their lives. I'm going to do that. So anyway, it's nice because this breaks down some traditional attitudes that people have towards technology. Oh, you have to be rich to use technology. You have to be male. 20 years ago, every time we tried to say women were going to shop online because it was valuable and useful to them, people would say, oh, women aren't going to use technology to shop. That's just not going to happen. We'd say, no, put aside your prior biases about immigrants, about women, about populations. Understand that technology is a way to move forward in your life for some of us. For other people, it's just a passing fad. That's fine. You can approach it that way too. But for some of us, we use it as a way to explore, express, move forward, advance in our lives, accomplish our goals, figure out what our goals are in the first place. So anyway, more background than you needed. But
well, on that point, that's a way into sort of understanding. Do you think that if you had studied that Latino or immigrant population, they would have also scored high on the other 9 attributes that you have in this tool because they had already sort of self-selected toward the future by making such a dramatic move to another country?
I wish I had the data to say for sure, but I would assume that they would.
Yeah.
I would assume that they would, because what we were measuring back then but didn't understand it is what we are now measuring in future fitness, but we have more clarity into what we're measuring. So I'll explain what it is we're measuring. And I think I sent over to you a blog post that if you want to post it along with the podcast, so that people can.
I also did
read some of this.
This is my results, so I can.
Oh, excellent! You came out high.
If I hadn't come out high, I wouldn't have even dared to talk to you today. But here I am. I'm in the high group.
Well, good. We'll explain a little bit about what that means and everything. But
yeah, let's flesh it out.
Yeah. So essentially, what we wanted to do is figure out what are all the things that come in this basket of attributes that tend to predict how you're going to approach technology. Are you going to see it as something that is a maximizer, an augment that you want, or is it, fulfilling any other role in your life, which is fine. And the reason why I was interested in that is not only that we had all these data to explain over the past several decades, but also because I am looking at the next things that are going to come from automation, AI, self-driving cars, all of the robotics that are coming into people's lives. And there's, a lot of angst about it, especially if you read the mass media. The major media seem to only see this in terms of major risks. And I know from my own survey work that, more than, nearly half the population doesn't see it as risky, or when they do, they also see it as beneficial. I mean, that's something that we've measured over and over and over again. We'll see something like when Google Glass came out. Let's take an easy example. Mm-hmm. All the media covered Google Glass as if it was either evil or stupid. Mm-hmm. There was never any way to talk about it other than those two things. And yeah, Google Glass didn't work. It didn't work because it wasn't very useful, though, not because the media correctly characterized it as evil or stupid. And in our surveys, we surveyed people, and we found out that, sure enough, about 50% of people were concerned about Google Glass, its privacy, security, and all of that. And if you ask a separate question in the same survey, you find about 50% of people want to try one. And so you naturally would come to the conclusion that, half the population is nervous and half the population is excited. No, actually, the correlation between those two things was almost zero, meaning that there was a fourth of the population that was both nervous about it and wanted to try it, a fourth of the population that just wanted to try it and isn't nervous about it, a fourth of the population that wants to that is nervous about it and doesn't want to try it. So you end up realizing that you can be both nervous about a technology and willing to see what it could do for you. What we've been trying to figure out is how do we turn that into a single measure where we could, without surveying you about your whole life and having you spend half an hour taking a personality assessment of a Myers-Briggs type or something like that, could we identify by using questions that predict these other things in your life, could we identify whether you are high, medium, or low in this concept that we're calling future fitness? And we used future fitness to describe this concept because we want to make it clear that it is not measuring a fixed attribute. This is not a personality trait. In fact, we avoid the word trait deliberately because although there are traits obviously related here, almost everything that we're measuring is something that you can change if you want to. Now, you may not want to, and that's, again, fine. It's your choice. But if you wanted to become more future fit, you can. And we feel the same way about physical fitness. Everyone can be more physically fit than they currently are if they want to. Doesn't mean everyone could run the Boston Marathon next Monday, which I'll be running, but very slowly. Because I can't, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm never going to run a sub 3:20 marathon that I'd have to run in order to qualify for the marathon. So I'm going to run it as a charity runner. I'm very proud of the charity I'm running for. But the fact is we could all be fitter, more physically fit than we are. And the same is true of being future fit, of being willing to look at new stuff, not just gadgets like Google Glass was, but new things like self-driving cars, even an algorithmic lifestyle that many of us are starting to encounter. Targeted advertisements. As silly as that sounds, or as annoying as it sounds to some people, and some people feel like it's an incredible violation when advertisements are targeted at them. 20% of the people in the population actually think it's good for them that advertisements are targeted. I'm one of those people. If I'm going to have to see ads, I'd rather see ones that are more relevant to me. But then there's another class of person who's like, well, that means they know things about me. That means that a computer somewhere is processing information about me, and I'm afraid of that. And I said, that's fine. We can feel differently about that. But the fact is, more algorithms are going to be encroaching upon our lives. And some of us will see that more positively than others. And maybe with some diagnostics and some encouragement, we could help the people who are unnecessarily afraid. I'm not saying that there aren't reasons to be concerned about privacy. Of course there are. And I have a colleague who's really the leading expert on privacy concerns in the world, Fatima Katablu. She's amazing. But she's the first to tell you that you use privacy as a way to make sure you can go get all the amazing benefits that you want from technology, not so that you can run from technology. Anyway, it's early in the morning that we're having this conversation, so I'm probably more
fluid,
more philosophical in our conversation. I'm not getting right to the point, Len. I apologize.
That's all right. We're circling it.
But the point is this. I have created a tool. I need to ask you 10 or 12 questions, and actually it's less than that, but I've buried them in 10 or 12 so that you can't try to game the system and figure out which questions matter. You go to this survey, which you can access at forr.com/futurefit. And if you go there, there's a little introduction, and you go through the introduction, and you'll take these 10 or 12 questions. And then when you're done, it's going to give you a score. Now, behind the scenes, it's actually giving you a 0 to 100 score. And what we've done for simplicity of reporting is that it really doesn't matter whether you're a 67 or a 74. It's more important that you understand where you generally fit. And so what we've done is we've broken your score down into one of three possibilities. You come in high, 80 to 100. You come in medium, which is 50 to 80, or you come in low, which is 0 to 50. And it's a pure bell curve distribution. 50% of the population is under 50, 30% of the population is in medium, and 20% is in high. And we chose those breakpoints for a couple of reasons. One is that they're incredibly predictive. And as you saw, and you were just holding up the sheet a minute ago, and this is the same sheet that everyone who takes the assessment can get for themselves, it'll say whether you're high, medium, or low. And then it will describe how you are likely to come out if we were to give you the 25-minute version of the survey and measure all 9 of these attributes of future fitness that we find are part of that basket of future fitness characteristics. And we're using the word attributes instead of traits because, as we said, we want these to be things that you feel like you can improve and work on. And I can give you more detail on some of these things if to the degree that you're interested, because each one of these things we've measured very, very deeply, and then we've come back and said, all right, what do we communicate to you in the short run so that you can use this information to say, I'm probably here on these 3 attributes, and I could improve those things. And what we're going to be doing over the long run is developing content to help you work on each of those 9 attributes. And think of those as 9 muscles that we want you to work out to become more fit.
Well, one thing, since I did take it, and this is a free test, by the way, so and you're right, it was very easy to take and kind of interesting. The numbers so it says that I scored high, and if I'm understanding it right, does that mean that everybody that scored high, for example, on the physical attribute, would have an 87% score if they took the full test for health, and then they would have an 84% on emotional? These numbers here aren't really my numbers. They're the numbers I share with everybody in the high group.
Right. They are the average score for people in your group. Now, they are the average score, so it's possible that you would score in the high group, and then on these 9 attributes, you could score medium on several of them.
Sure.
You could even score low on 1, maybe 2, as long as your other scores were high enough to compensate for that. So it doesn't automatically guarantee that you're high on all 9 of these things, but it just says your likelihood of being high on all 9 of these things is pretty strong.
Yeah.
And I'm a statistics guy, and so I've built this behind the scenes to be very, very robust, and I'm very, very actually pleased with how robust these are. I've gone through hundreds of lines of responses from participants in the survey to see whether it's, not only making sense statistically, but whether it also meets the face validity of, let's see, this person is low on these 3 things, but they're high on everything else. What does that mean? Is that possible? What would it be like to be that person? And So I'm really pleased with how robust it is. But I'm more excited down the road when we're going to actually share the long version and let someone actually measure themselves on all 9 of these things, so that they can say, which of these things do I need to improve on? Because right now you take this survey, and let's say it comes out and says you're medium. Mm-hmm. I was with a group of clients recently where we did it privately, shared with them their scores privately, and they each individually opened their results and looked at them. And several of them were medium. And the questions they had were, well, so how do I know how I improve my fitness? Now, first of all, the very fact that you want to improve your fitness is a good indicator of fitness, yeah. Because it's a psychological, emotional disposition to improvement that is good. So I'd say to them, well, look, these are the 9 things that might be holding you back. Let's look at them. And it doesn't take long to look through them. Physical health, emotional health, psychological health. And the emotional health measure is actually a very complicated measure that we've used. But you can ask yourself some basic emotional quotient. If you've ever done any research on EQ, mm-hmm. The basics of your emotional quotient. We didn't measure emotional quotient in our survey, but we used another method that's similar, provides a similar result, which is your EQ is a function of, are you aware of your own emotional states, mm-hmm. and are you aware of other people's likely emotional states, and then third, are you aware of your ability to influence other people's emotional states so that you can temper what you do that either causes or influences other people's emotional states? So those 3 things, you ask yourself that. Am I good at understanding my own emotions? Am I good at identifying other people's emotions? And am I aware of the impact that I have on those emotions? You can go through that self-diagnostic without needing to take a 30-minute survey from us. But those are the kinds of things that people are saying, well, how do I improve this? And I usually say start at those health level attributes, because those are foundational. If you're someone who is psychologically healthy, and in this particular tool, we're talking about a disposition towards growth, a disposition towards open-endedness. Growth mindset is one way to describe it, although we're not measuring the traditional tools that measure growth mindset. That's what we're calling psychological health. So if you're physically healthy and you're emotionally healthy and you possess psychological health, well, your ability to do all the other 6 things on the list is also going to be better. And I'll just say something about physical health, because this one's a tricky one, because, half the population is less healthy than average. And so it can be discouraging, and people will say, well, I know I need to eat right, and I know I need to exercise. We actually measured health in 2 different ways in the research that we did to create this tool. We measured actual health to the best ability that we could. So that's, presence of certain disease states, blood pressure, all of these things that we thought, okay, these are going to be accurate measures of health. And it was correlated somewhat with future fitness, but not nearly as correlated as behavioral health. So you could actually have high blood pressure, but be someone who is trying to eat right and get a little bit of physical exercise and trying to sleep well, and you'll be more future fit than someone who doesn't eat right, doesn't sleep well, and yet who has absolutely no negative health markers. Interesting. So if you can sort of get that idea. So it's not actually your actual physical health relative to average that matters. It's your health behaviors that matter. That was more predictive of future fitness. And that was another thing that was really reassuring to me, because I don't want someone to come to me and say, well, look, I'm a diabetic, I'm insulin dependent. You're telling me that I'm never going to be future fit because my health is going to be a barrier to me. And actually, we have some diabetics in our survey sample, and sure enough, they can be future fit too, as long as they're engaging in behaviors to moderate their health impacts and so on.
Well, that's fascinating. And I can see the connection, because if you have sort of a sense of agency over your own health, that I can see how that would fit with agency over the future. What about agility? That's one of the 3 mental attributes. What kinds of things went into your ability to measure that for future fitness?
Yeah. So in that middle row, so when folks look at their results sheet, they'll see the top row is health. The middle row we call mental attributes, and they're obviously going to be related to psychological health, but they're specific characteristics of thought. And one of them is just an openness to novelty that's characterized by curiosity. Another one is The one you just mentioned, which now I'm just blanking on because I got stuck on the curiosity one.
Oh,
you
the
brought up agility.
Yeah.
One of them is agility, and the agility measure. So we went in with a hypothesis on this one because, of course, everyone who's in the world of software and business innovation knows that the term agile is being used all the time. We also use the word adaptive when we talk about organizations because agile refers to a specific method of doing software development and business process innovation. But agility is a really good word to describe the mental predisposition to feeling that you can change your approach to something when the old approach isn't working anymore. And that's essentially what we set out to measure. We said, is this actually an independent variable, meaning it's something that you have in you already? When you show up at work and they say, hey, we're going to have an agile work environment, and your brain says, oh, I get that intuitively. Or are you someone who shows up at work and they say, we're going to have an agile, test and fail mentality, and your brain says, wait, I need to know the rule book. I need to see what's supposed to happen. I need to know how I'm going to be measured for the next 6 years, not just the next 3 weeks. And people will have varying dispositions in that tendency to embrace agility. And so we tried to measure it. Turns out there was a couple of good ways to measure it. A lot of the best ways to measure it have to do with your approach to your work life, how you handle challenges at work, and so on. Not everyone's full-time employed, however, and so we use that as to confirm how we were measuring agility, and we measure agility in a more traditional battery of psychological traits. And I'm being vague because obviously we have secret sauce behind the scenes, but think about it as just attitudinal statements to the effect of, do you feel like you're someone who can approach a problem in a new way? Or you feel like you're someone when you get stuck, you can find a way to get unstuck? Right. Those aren't the exact questions, but those are the types of questions that you ask enough of them, you see how they statistically group together, and then you see how predictive the grouping is of future fitness overall. And it turns out that agility is really crucial. And so that's good and it's bad. It's good because it means that it is something that you might possess, that you can apply wherever you go. But it's bad if you're an employer, because it means that someone walking in the door and you're saying, we're going to be this innovative, fast-driving company, like an Amazon. You and I talk about Amazon all the time. This is the Kindle Chronicles after all. That's an environment that they foster, that kind of agility. Well, if you walk in not having an agile mindset yourself, you're going to spend a lot of your time saying, this is out of control. Why are we doing this crazy? Why don't we just set down the rules and just really root ourselves in the past? And you might actually leave that job never having really understood that it just wasn't a personality fit, So anyway, what we're telling employers, because employers are asking us already, it's like, well, how do we use future fitness to screen employees? And we say, well, careful. We're not giving you a filter that says who to reject and who to accept. We're giving you a tool to understand how to coach people. And if someone comes in and they don't have this attribute of agility fully developed in them, but they are high on curiosity and they have high emotional health, well, good. That's someone you can go to and say, hey, there's an opportunity for you to stretch this muscle that maybe just hasn't had a chance to be developed, and you can help them develop this characteristic, because that characteristic is going to be very useful to them, and as an employer, it's going to be very useful to you if you help them develop it.
I think in one of the articles of the blog post you wrote is that you were the first client for this tool, and I don't know if this is too personal, but did you find out what your limiting attribute is, and how are you doing at improving on it? Yeah,
it's very interesting. So as I said in the beginning, I've been doing this kind of research for so many years, trying to understand who's going to do the new thing. I have a huge bias towards doing the new thing. I have a very high orientation towards novelty, which is that is a trait characteristic in me. It's not just an attribute that I've developed. But what's interesting for me is I thought that would automatically mean that I would do all the cool new stuff for all the right reasons. And so when I was going through this research, I came at it with my own hypotheses based on my own experience. And turns out that some of the characteristics that I thought that motivated people to be like me aren't actually future fit. the things that for example, there are some personality related characteristics that we tested for, and I thought for sure, like for example, being introverted or extroverted. I thought, well, extroverts are going to be more, they're going to have more what you call trait openness in personality psychology. And they tend to. And I thought, well, trait openness is going to also correlate with, agility and interest in novelty. And it does correlate slightly, but not enough to make it to our list. So you can be a solid introvert and be very fit for the future. And that's actually a relief for me, because I'm actually one of those people who's borderline introvert extrovert, depending on the circumstance. But so as I go through all these things, I'm testing my own hypotheses about what I thought I have learned over these years, and it turns out that some of them are true and some of them are not. In my particular case, I'll just share that I think the thing that I was most surprised by is how much so one of the characteristics on the bottom row of the attributes is a collaboration bias, or a bias for cooperation and collaboration. And in our report that's for clients, we explain this in more detail. But this one surprised me, and I was very happy, because I thought, I had this idea, I'm a little bit like this, that the person out there on the fringe using the technology, being innovative, is a little bit of a loner. And I do this sometimes. I mean, I've gotten in trouble so many times at work because I brought in a wireless, a Wi-Fi router to work, and I plugged it into the Ethernet jack, and I made my own wireless network at work about a year before the company officially approved having Wi-Fi at work. Well, of course, I got in trouble for that. And I've always had that tendency, and so I just thought that would be a strong predictor of future fitness. And it turns out it's not. It's not necessarily a detractor, but it's not on the list because a stronger predictor of future fitness is a desire to collaborate and a bias for cooperation. So, maybe the person like Elon Musk is that guy on the fringe who goes and invents stuff. But for the rest of us to use it in a productive way, we have to have a little bit of a desire to collaborate and share. Otherwise, we're not going to ever make it productive. We're just going to go out and make our rockets and stuff like Elon Musk does. And I thought that was really good. I felt really good about that, because I went through this whole process thinking that I was describing some kind of elite cadre of people who were going to create the future. They had the right stuff in a kind of 1960s era Apollo space flight kind of way. And what I found out was, no, actually, the people most likely to be future fit are the most likely, and we measured this, we validated this in some interesting ways. They're most likely to give of their time to charity. They donate a higher percentage of their income to charitable and social causes. It's remarkable. These are good people. So being fit for the future basically means being fit for being a useful part of your community, a contributing member of your family. I mean, these are the kind of people you want to be out there developing robots and building AIs and working at Amazon, because these are the kind of people that you are going to find are going to want to do the right thing. And I can't hold up a better example of this than all these people out there who are using their 3D printers to make prosthetic limbs for kids. At pennies on the dollar compared to what it used to cost to have to go to a lab and have them fit. And of course the ones made in the labs are better. But in the meantime, I've got this plastic, self-printed hand that has basic flexion capability, and that's amazing. And that was made by a do-gooder who was fit for the future. So, I was really pleased that turned out to be the result, because it wasn't a guarantee in my hypothesis. I thought maybe the lonesome technology rogue was going to be a bigger predictor of future fitness.
It strikes me that future fitness, the way you're describing it in such nuance and in these new dimensions, would also describe somebody who's really handling the present very well. That it's almost, I can map it to efforts to just make your life better now. And is that the case? Do you see, what's the difference between being present fit and being future fit?
Actually, you earlier used the word that I found coming back to mind over and over, and that was agency. When we were first developing the empowered customer research a couple years back, we really, those of us who are more grounded in the psychological research, we were saying it's not even empowerment. It's just agency. I have a sense of, and in psychology, you often call it personal efficacy. You have a sense of, I as an individual have the ability to shape the world around me, influence people around me, and am not only capable of this, but aware of the responsibility that that brings. I mean, that is a psychological approach to the world that is incredibly healthy, but also very productive. And so, yes, you're fit for the future if you are fit for the present. And that's why, go back to the way we were measuring health, actual health versus behavioral health. Behavioral health patterns are an indication that you're someone who is willing in the present to make changes and to engage in patterns that are going to preserve you for the future, as opposed to just having the lucky draw of good genes that make you healthy and therefore you can eat all the Snickers and cookies that you want, which was what I was like when I was 20, and I lived to pay for that. But But you're right. We are we're describing the way we really want everyone to be. You want your employees to be this way. You want your customers to be this way. You want yourself as a manager to be this way. I mean, that's who we're typically writing for at Forrester. So in this report, we summarize future fitness and what it means and how useful it's going to be. And then we say, look, as a manager or an executive, you've got to figure out whether you're one of these people or not. There's no guarantee just because you're successful in business that you got here because you were fit for the future. Mm-hmm. You might have gotten here because you're a really diligent hard worker, very capable in a certain area, and that's all good, but you might not actually be emotionally healthy. And I think many of us know executives who aren't emotionally healthy, and some of them have been my clients over the years. So I did this research knowing that I'm telling people, be a better you. But I'm telling them to be a better them in a way that's, I guess, not encumbered by a particular politics, a particular moral view of the world. It's pragmatic because I'm saying, look, you're going to have a better outcome in life if you do this. But at the same time, it's very moral in its effect because it says, look, you're going to be respectful of your peers. You're going to be a contributor to your culture and your society. And I don't know, it just feels really great to be to this point where we have the 20 years of empirical evidence that being a good person actually makes you better equipped to live life in the present, as you say, and then obviously more adaptable for the future.
Well, let's finish up with some of the specifics of how people can, and this is kind of unusual for Forrester because you're outward facing, sort of a consumer interaction going on here. You said how people can take this test, and then there was a place where I could put in my email address for future updates. What kinds of updates will people be able to expect and when? And at some point, I'm sure there's a transition into paying for some of these services. But can you describe the map forward if someone listening to the show says, "Boy, I'd like to see where this goes"?
Yes. So as we said before, go to forr.com/futurefit. There'll be a little introduction, little video from me saying, here's what this is about. You will take the short version of the assessment. And what we're doing, we're not actually measuring these 9 attributes about you. We're using proxy variables that you are telling us about yourself. We're using an algorithm that computes whether you are high, medium, or low on future fitness, on this scale of 0 to 100 that we were talking about before. So you'll get a result that will show you as high, medium, or low, and then it will show you the 9 attributes and how people in your group, on average, score on those 9 attributes. And as you can attest, some of the differences are stark. If you're high, you're incredibly well equipped for life in general, and that's what we want everyone to be. So we'd love to see all these numbers go up. But in the short run, what you're going to have to do is just sort of keep your eye on my blogging, because I'm going to be blogging every couple of weeks with some more thoughts about what it means to be future fit. I'll start teasing out each of the 9 attributes in these blog posts and say, some of what I just shared with you about health, for example, about how we measured health in 2 ways, and behavioral health turns out to be the one that's most predictive of future fitness. I'll be providing some of that detail in a way that you can consume it more broadly. But at this point, it's self-diagnostic and self-treatment. If you do enter your email at any point at the end of the survey or later on, there's another chance to do it. And there's another place to do it, and that's forr.com/futurefitnextsteps. If you ever decide to sign up or tell someone else to sign up, what you're signing up for is that when we do have the long version of the survey, and We've already built that survey, but what we'll do is we'll let you take it, and it will measure your 9 attributes specifically. So it will come back and give you a score of where you are compared to your group in those 9 things. And you'll say, oh, okay, I'm really low over here, and I'm really high over here. And, then our job at that point is we didn't want to then give people those specific scores without specific next steps in each 9 of the 9 attributes. And so what we're trying to do is build that content plan right now. And as you said, this is very far afield for us. We don't generally develop content for a consumer audience. We never have. And so we're having to find new resources to do this. We're very excited about it. We're trying to decide how many of these things we create versus partnering with, because there are plenty of good experts out there who work on issues like emotional health and psychological health. And I'm not a psychiatrist, and so I'm not going to try to pretend to be that person. So we're developing that content plan and strategy, and the idea would be, given that we're Forrester, there's 2 ways this could go. One way this could go is that employers will come to us as part of our employee experience research effort, which is also ongoing, and we'll say, okay, we'd like to give this tool to our employees, and so we will pay you, Forrester, to give this tool to our employees and give them a way to then improve. Now, that would have to be done very carefully. We need to make sure that the employee feels like they're not being screened or prepared to be kicked out of the company because they scored low on 3 things. We're in negotiation with a couple of companies about that kind of thing right now because we need to make sure that we approach this in a way that's good for. We want to increase everyone's fitness, not create fits versus not fits. And so that's I think our most likely path for Forrester. And then what we do for our consumer audience, do we then just say, hey, as an individual consumer, you can do this too? And maybe there's a light version that anyone can do for free. That's sort of where I'm leaning right now. There's also the possibility that, hey, it's a $4.99 app that you buy with in-app purchases to get access to later down modules. Those are the kinds of things that are available to us right now. But because of who we are, we're more likely to pursue the employer strategy first, then see what of that we are also able to share with the public. Our goal, though, is to share this with as many people as possible. And so that means some of it's going to have to be free, and that's good. We like that. The more everyone is fit for the future, the more our work is going to take off, because we're going to have more companies coming to us and saying, all right, we're fit and ready to go. How do we innovate? How do we make the next thing? How do we compete with Amazon? How do we do all of these things? So really exciting new era for us, and one that my own personal research has built towards, that I'm very pleased to be where we are.
Well, it kind of seems like you were made for this.
Yeah, you might say that.
I have been speaking with James McQuivey, a Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Thanks very much, James, and good luck in the marathon.
Thank you.
I'll have a link in the show notes if you want to help James McQuivey support the organization that's sponsoring him in the marathon. It's Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Children. Looks like a good organization. He'll be running the marathon with lots of other people on April 15th. That's it for this week. We had an action-packed visit from my daughter, Rue, her husband, Mike, and Jake 5 and Ryan 3 this week. Their stay began with temperatures in the 60s, perfect for a trip to the zoo, and ended with a blizzard the day that we hung out at the Denver Aquarium. I love the chance to catch glimpses of the world through the eyes of Jake and Ryan at 5 and 3. It's a pretty amazing place, as it turns out. Next week's guest will be a member of the Kindle team at Amazon. I don't know exactly who yet, but I've been assured that there will be somebody that will join us to talk about the development of the all-new basic Kindle. Darlene and I are going to fly to South Bend, Indiana tomorrow for an event Sunday that I will be talking about on my new show named Edgecast. You can check it out at anchor.com/Len-Edgerly. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from downtown Denver, Colorado. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.